Well, more than perhaps ever before, premiers have played a role in this election campaign. Mostly, they've been targets for Liberal attack, a demonization dominated by Ontario Premier Doug Ford and Alberta's Jason Kenney. But Kenney has also been called into service as a Conservative asset on tour in Ontario and other regions as well. Let's talk about premier politics in a federal election campaign. Former Ontario Premier Kathleen Wynne joins us from Toronto. Former BC Premier Christy is in Vancouver. I'm going to start with you, Christy, because there's something happening right now in the campaign that kind of relates to you. You won the most seats in the 2017 BC election, but lost power to an NDP Green alliance. What's your advice to Andrew Scheer if he finds himself in the same situation, facing a Liberal NDP coalition?
Well, I would say it's going to be different for him because it's the incumbent government that constitutionally is called on to try and form a government first. So my first piece of advice for all of them is going to be, I think election night is the night that never ends when you get a minority and you have to cobble together a coalition. And so he's got two things, I think, to think about. One, watch carefully what the Liberals end up doing. And then on the other hand, they'll be working in the background in this bizarre kind of space, I think, to put together some kind of a coalition or some kind of working agreement with the Bloc Québécois. Well, now you remember this, when Stéphane Dion tried to do that with the Bloc when Stephen Harper got a minority. The Conservatives lost their nut about it. So it's going to be interesting. And I mean, the Liberals could end up in a coalition with Jody Wilson-Raybould.
Oh,
now that would be interesting.
Okay, Kathleen, I just got to ask you: would your advice be for Justin Trudeau to hang on, even if he has fewer seats than the Conservatives on the day after the election?
I would not presume to advise, but I think that there's a real danger, and I don't know, Christy, you've got experience with this, but when I became premier, we were in a minority situation here too, Don, and right. My approach was to go issue by issue. We needed to get a budget passed, and I think the word coalition kind of distracts people from the issue of needing to find a way to govern, needing to find a way to get the policies, to get the legislation passed that needs to be passed. And that can be done in various ways. I think we have to wait till election night.
Yeah, I mean, as Christy Clark well knows, I mean, it's not really a coalition per se in BC. It's kind of an alliance. There's no shared power in cabinet and that sort of thing. So it's a bit different than what I think we're talking about in terms of a coalition. I want to quickly get your thoughts, though. If Justin Trudeau's re-elected, I'm curious, can he realistically get anything accomplished with Ford or Kenney at, say, the First Minister's level? I mean, there's a pretty deep well of hostility filling up there. What's your take, Kathleen Wynne?
Well, if Justin is re-elected, when he's re-elected, he is going to work with all the premiers. I mean, I think one of the things I worry about with Andrew Scheer is that if he follows in Stephen Harper's model, meeting with one premier at a time or not at all, and Christy and I remember that that kind of cold space between premiers and the Prime Minister, I really expect that Justin will meet with all of the premiers. And yes, there are some pretty conflictual relationships at that table right now, but bringing everyone together and having the mix of premiers is a great antidote to specifically hostile relationships. And so I believe that that's the way he would go, and I think that that is the best for the country.
So, Christy Clark, do you forgive and forget if you're Doug Ford and Jason Kenney? You say, oh, Justin Trudeau, it's nice to work with you again, or do you sense a grudge might be lingering there?
Oh, no question about that. I mean, I think if Justin Trudeau is re-elected Prime Minister, and in likelihood, I mean, it does look at the moment like he will be likeliest to get a minority government and be called upon by the Lieutenant or the Governor General to form some kind of a functioning government. He is going. I mean, there's no question. Ontario and Alberta are going to be at war with the federal government. Then he's going to be contesting Bill 21, which he says which he said he will do. He'll be at war with the Quebec government. And I mean, here's where Kathleen and I would, I think, differ. I would say, we certainly don't want to go back to a world where prime ministers didn't meet with premiers at all. But I wouldn't argue for a second that Justin Trudeau has achieved very much, if anything at all, productive by working with the provinces. He meets with the premiers And he basically says, look, it's my way or the highway. I mean, he brought in the Harper cuts to healthcare. Minister said, Premier said, we don't want that. He said, tough luck. He brought in this national carbon tax. Almost nobody signed on. You know, I mean, it's been a fractious, very difficult relationship. And I think he's really failed when he said, you know, he wants to work with First Nations and, you know, an important partner. I think he's failed at that. Wants to work with premiers, important partner. I think he's failed at that too. So lots of room to improve there. And it does appear based on the polls that he may get that chance to try and improve his behavior on that front.
But Christy, I guess I would just say that, you know, the issues around enhancing the retirement security, I know that was at the beginning, enhancing the CPP, I know that that was at the beginning of his mandate, but there was a pretty productive conversation, and I would say things like pharmacare, you know, I had expected that it would be a much bigger issue in this campaign, but that's something that is going to need to be talked about across the country. And I got to say that having Kenney and Ford, even though they are in, you know, obviously pitched battle with Trudeau, having them at the table with all of the other premiers kind of they're going to have to put some water in their wine, you know, in terms of some of these other issues. And of course, they're not going to talk about the most contentious issues at that table, but they do need to find some common ground. I think people expect that.
Yeah, but you brought a good point up there, Kathleen, in the sense that pharmacare falls under health care. That's a provincial responsibility under the Constitution. Don't you have to have a pretty good relationship, Christy Clark, to get something as comprehensive as a national pharmacare introduced into the provinces?
You do, and the problem, I think, for at least Western provinces, and I would certainly say Saskatchewan and Alberta, is that you can't, on the one hand, and Justin Trudeau is increasingly moving to an anti-oil stance during this campaign, say we want to throttle the revenue that's going to come from the biggest part of our economy, and we want to massively increase government spending on a worthy program like a national pharmacare program. So I think that's going to be part of the problem. But the other thing, in my observation, is Justin Trudeau likes to have enemies. He likes to have people that he can go to war with as a way to virtue signal that he's something else and something different. So he's always, unlike I think Mr. Chrétien, Mr. Mulroney, or Mr. Martin, he really likes to have a foil. He likes to have somebody to fight against. So I actually think at the table, you're going to have a couple of premiers that really don't want to make friends with him, but I also think you're going to be having a prime minister who is quite happy to go to war.
All right.
Well,
you agree with that, Kathleen?
John, I you know, I just have to push back a little bit on that.
That's
and Christy,
good.
it may be just a different, you know, a different experience of the man, of the process. But I found as the premier that it was very important to Justin Trudeau to have people he could work with, and that he was looking for that, and certainly I did my utmost to work with him because we were working to common goals. And yes, there were very difficult conversations. The health accord, that was a really difficult conversation that we had at the table, but they weren't all that difficult. And I think that, again, we got to find, as the first ministers in the country, they have to find some common ground, and it is the Prime Minister's responsibility, I believe, to work with them to do what they can.
All right, I'm going to put you on the spot. Christy Clark, what's your prediction for Monday night?
I think the Liberals are going to end up in a minority situation. I think they will be called on by the Governor General to form the government, and I think the NDP aren't going to have a lot of leverage unless they want to force an election. And so I think what will probably happen is you'll see the first couple of bills, you know, the confidence bills, pass. I do think, though, from your perspective, Dawn, as a journalist, the interesting stuff is going to come after, because when the mean girls in the Liberal Party of Canada get together and decide that Justin Trudeau couldn't pull this out of the hat a second time, I think his leadership is going to be, you know, is going to start to feel a little bit threatened.
Kathleen Wynne, I'll eat this coffee mug if you say anything different than a Liberal minority win, or maybe a Liberal majority. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to say we're going to land between a Liberal. My prediction is somewhere between a Liberal minority, Liberal majority,
I'm shocked.
and I'm not going to quote go quite as far as to get into the vindictiveness that might come that Christy was talking about. But it's going to be an interesting night, and it's really too close to call at this moment.
You got that right. Thank you both. Interesting perspectives. We'll see how it turns out on Monday night. Thanks again.
Thanks, Dawn.
Take care, Christy.
Kathleen.
Thanks,
nice
Dawn.
to talk to you.